And we're back, folks, right here with WWE Network and Chill. And today we're talking the latest episode of WWE 24 on WrestleMania 36, entitled WrestleMania, The Show Must Go On. Obviously focusing on the empty arena aspect of WrestleMania 36 this past year. Another very good WWE 24, as always. Literally every single one of these over the last 5 or 6 years has been good to great to amazing, so no surprise there. My only surprise, though, was the fact that they saved this for now and not for next year. Usually they save the 24s on every WrestleMania until the following Royal Rumble season. For example, when they first started doing these with the WrestleManias, the WrestleMania 30 24, WrestleMania New Orleans, I think it was called, went up in January of 2015. I think either the night of the Royal Rumble or the next night. I think it was the night of the Royal Rumble. And they've done that every year since, including this year. Like, for example, WrestleMania 35's 24, that went up, I think, either the night of Royal Rumble this year or the next night. So they've been doing this for a while now. Maybe they just did it now just because we're still in the midst of the whole coronavirus thing. They're capitalizing off of it. They're capitalizing off of it and whatnot. So I'm not too surprised there. But again, the timing of it was interesting just because we are only a couple of months removed from WrestleMania. Maybe they felt it was time now just because, they're out of the Performance Center now. They're in the Thunderdome, which I personally have enjoyed so far. It has its negatives as well, but so far I think it's exceeded my expectations. So maybe that's why. But regardless of the timing, it was a very good documentary. I watched it after the SummerSlam pay-per-view on Sunday. It was quite good, and the hour flew by. So they start this thing off with WrestleMania 36 being announced for Tampa just 1 year ago in early 2019. They usually announce the WrestleMania venue a year in advance, and that's what they did last year. And I should know, too, which is funny, with these WrestleMania 24s, they always put WrestleMania New York, or WrestleMania New Orleans, or WrestleMania Orlando, They couldn't do that with this one because it took place at the fucking Performance Center. So technically it could be called WrestleMania Orlando or wherever the Performance Center is, wherever that emanates from. I'm pretty sure it's in Orlando, but they just said it was WrestleMania, the show must go on, which I thought was funny. So anyway, they showed the news clippings of WrestleMania 36 being announced for Raymond James Stadium in, not Florida. Yeah, it was in Florida this year. It was in Tampa, not Orlando. They show Rhea Ripley at the arena ahead of her, ahead of the match with Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania this year to tape content for NXT, which they actually did air. They aired that in an episode of NXT, I think back in February, if I'm not mistaken. And they kind of go through her rise in wrestling, starting at 16 in Australia, getting signed at the age of 20. She was only wrestling for 3 or 4 years when she got signed by the company. That's crazy. She joined the inaugural Mae Young Classic. She was in the second Mae Young Classic, lost both times. She eventually went on to win gold in NXT UK, becoming the first ever NXT UK Women's Champion ever, before becoming the NXT Women's Champion just late last year in December of 2019. She admits that she had always looked up to Charlotte. A match with Charlotte was what she always wanted. And then the coronavirus hit. They showed the news clippings of the coronavirus, canceling events, WrestleMania, still hopefully moving on forward without fans, or with fans, they're hoping. And when this whole thing first started, I know I wasn't the only one who thought that they could still maybe do it, that this coronavirus thing may last a week, it may last a month. I mean, maybe not a month. I'm thinking, okay, it's only going to be a couple days to a week or so. Clearly, it's August as I speak right now, and we're still in the midst of this thing. So, very stupid of me and many other people to assume, but we didn't know. We didn't know at that point. We didn't know how serious this thing was until everything got shut down in very quick and decisive fashion. So, as a result of all this stuff, WrestleMania 36 officially has to be moved to the Performance Center with no fans. Drew McIntyre, and they've talked about this with Drew before on his Chronicle that went up, I think, WrestleMania weekend or soon after. I think it was WrestleMania weekend. That he was on a media tour in Scotland when he got the news that WrestleMania was being canceled in Tampa and being moved to the PC instead. And of course, he was really heartbroken about the whole thing. Drew McIntyre has, busted his ass over the last number of years to get to where he was to where he is today. They kind of recite his whole thing about how he started out in WWE, FCW champion in 2009, got called up to the main roster in late 2009, won the Intercontinental Championship, and then it was just all downhill from there. They did nothing with the guy. He joined 3MB and ended up getting fired. They actually showed his final singles match in the company, losing to fucking El Torito. That was the final nail in the coffin for his career in WWE. Got released, but he built himself back up. He wrestled in ICW, he wrestled in Evolve. They didn't show it, but he went to Impact and won the World Championship over there as well. He won every championship that he could to prove to himself that he was indeed worthy of being that guy, of being the main event guy. Not to prove it to WWE, but to prove it to the fans, and more importantly, prove it to himself, that he could be the guy that people always thought he could be. And eventually, he did re-sign to WWE in the spring of 2017, joining NXT, almost immediately winning the NXT Championship, and then fast forward back to his move to the main roster in April of 2018. I was at that show on Raw when he got drafted to Raw with Dolph Ziggler. That was a cool moment. No less than 2 years later, in January of this year, winning the Royal Rumble match, eliminating Brock Lesnar, and setting himself up for a WWE title opportunity in the main event of WrestleMania 36. Of course, he was initially angry about all the news, that WrestleMania had to be canceled. Why me? I mean, the guy, he jokes about it. He's like, of course, the year that Drew McIntyre main events WrestleMania is the year that everything goes to shit and that there's going to be no fans. Like, what the fuck? At least we got that Royal Rumble moment. I will say that. At least we got that Royal Rumble win. I was happy about that. That being said, though, he does admit that there are bigger problems in the world, aside from just himself, with the pandemic going on. And I think that's a very good attitude to have. He could have been, woe was me and whatnot, and I'm sure he was for a little while. But then he came to the realization, listen, like, there's far bigger issues out there than what I'm going through, so I really can't be too down about this whole thing. He still is competing for the WWE Championship at the end of the day. No fans are fans. He's still the number one contender to the top title in the company at the biggest show of the year. Doesn't quite feel like it, but he is. So they then transition from Rhea Ripley, Drew McIntyre, to then John Cena. Very cool to see John Cena on this thing. We don't see, too much of John Cena nowadays. I don't think he was a part of the WrestleMania 35 24. I know he was at WrestleMania 35 with the whole return thing, and he came back as the Doctor of Thugonomics and whatnot. He wasn't a heavy focus, though. This is the first amount of John Cena we've gotten in any WWE documentary in quite some time. But he talked about the challenges of having a cinematic match. He's not, something he's not exactly used to, of course. And they showed the behind the scenes that Bruce Pritchard played a very big hand in the creation of that match. And not a lot of people like Bruce Pritchard. Can't say I'm the biggest fan of his work personally. I do like Bruce, but, his recent work with Raw is not the greatest. SmackDown as well. Though that can be more attributed to Vince McMahon than Bruce. And that's a whole other discussion for a different day. But as far as Bruce is concerned, he was heavily involved in the creation of that match. So if you want to shit on the guy for ruining Raw or whatever in the last year and a half, SmackDown too, you got to give him credit for that great Firefly Funhouse match, which you loved. Not everyone did. A majority of people did, though. And he was heavily involved in that. You actually hear him voicing one of the puppets at one point, which was funny. Cena's loving this. Cena's fucking loving the creation of this match. They showed him doing the whole NWO thing when he came out in his debut gear from 2002. They showed the behind the scenes of that. They showed that it was filmed at the WWE warehouse, of course, in Connecticut. And he said that the story is just as important as the match itself. And that it was around a 7.5-hour shoot. That's crazy. That is insane. So they then move on to Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens says, it still feels like WrestleMania to me, even though it doesn't, it's still WrestleMania. Building, large building or not, it's still WrestleMania. I'm still excited for it. And to not be excited for it would be disrespectful to other people. So again, great attitude for Kevin Owens here. We hear from Elias very briefly, and honestly, I completely forgot about Elias until we saw him here because we haven't seen Elias on the show in months. He got injured back in May, legit, which is why we haven't seen him since. But he said they were amazed that they just, he was amazed that they got the fucking sign in there. They got the whole WrestleMania sign in the back of the commentators inside the Performance Center. That was pretty cool. Something I guess a lot of those guys doubted they could do, but when in doubt, you got to get the WrestleMania sign inside the Performance Center. So anyway, they talk about Edge having his first real singles match back in front of no fans. Cena discussed the temperature checks and all the protocols and whatnot in entering the building. I guess it's nice that they featured that, but it's not about the temperature checks, though. They had to do actual COVID tests. And the issue is that, it's nice they were doing temperature checks, and this was still early on in the pandemic, but because they were only doing temperature checks, that a lot of people got sick. a couple of months later. So I don't know if I exactly would have shown that, but I'm sure people would have been questioning, well, what, protocols are you taking to combat the coronavirus, blah, blah, blah. So I guess they kind of had to, but I thought it was interesting they included that, just because they don't really discuss that in any other form. Like, I know they do in press releases and shit like that, talking about, this is what we're doing to combat the coronavirus, blah, blah, blah. But still, I thought that was a bit interesting. So anyway, we hear from Braun Strowman next. And he kind of recalled the whole story about how he ended up at WrestleMania. He wasn't supposed to be part of the show. We had not seen Braun Strowman before WrestleMania since Elimination Chamber, when he got pinned for the Intercontinental Championship by Sami Zayn in that 3-on-1 handicap match, also involving Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro. So they had no plans for Braun at WrestleMania. I don't know if that's a pandemic thing or what the hell happened. Maybe they would have put him in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which he already won. I'm not exactly sure why they would have done that. But he wasn't even on SmackDown. He was on no WWE TV shows leading into WrestleMania. Roman Reigns had to pull out. He didn't have to, but he wanted to, and he thought it was the best decision, which it was. And we got Roman Reigns back on Sunday SummerSlam, which was cool. So back to Braun. He wasn't supposed to be a part of WrestleMania, and because of that, they told him, hey, we don't need you here. So he drove from his home, and again, this was early April. The pandemic hit in mid-March. We didn't really know a lot about travel, and he probably didn't want to fly down there and shit. So he drove from the Performance Center to his home, I think of Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. It took him 21 hours. That's fucking crazy. And that's just to get home. That's a lot in and of itself. And that's not even accounting for the fact that from that point forward, they needed him. He got a call from Mark Carrano. He tells Braun, hey, Braun, we need you. It's an emergency. We'll tell you about it when you get here. He's like, okay. Being the consummate professional that Braun is, by and large, he went. So he drove from his home to the airport. I don't know where it was. I forgot where he said it was. But it was a very regional airport, to the point, like a local regional airport or whatever, where he said to the point where the runway was like halfway grass. Like half of the runway was actual grass. That's how small the airport was. So he takes the flight out of there to the Performance Center, where they tell him, listen, Roman Reigns can't be here. He's choosing to stay home. We need you to face Goldberg for the Universal Championship. How fucking crazy is that, They told him they need him to replace Roman Reigns. And he says Roman outright right here, Braun does about Roman, that he did the right thing. He's got 2 girls on the way. He just had twins. And Roman, I think at the end of the day, after what happened in June at the PC, absolutely made the right choice. Roman did, and Sami Zayn did specifically. Some people left later, like we haven't seen Bryan since this whole thing happened. He just had a baby with Brie, his second child. So he didn't leave initially, but he has since taken time off, probably partly due to that. Roman was gone, not from the get-go. When this whole thing first happened, he wasn't like, all right, peace, I'm out of here. I'm pretty sure he was either on the go-home show for SmackDown, on SmackDown before the pay-per-view, or the SmackDown before that. He was a part of the pay-per-view, or he was a part of the build of the show until minutes to midnight. He showed up at the WrestleMania taping and was like, listen, I'm not doing this. And I know you could talk about the timing, whether it was professional or not. It was his choice. And he's like, listen, I'm not doing it for X, Y, and Z. Obviously, he had leukemia a couple of years ago. I don't know if that was the first reason as to why. It definitely wasn't, obviously, but I'm sure that was a factor. And he did the right thing. I completely agree with what he did there. So anyway, Braun gets really emotional talking about Roman Reigns and the fact that because Roman left and he decided to not do the show and doing the right thing, it gave Braun an opportunity. And he will be forever grateful to Roman for that. And Roman actually put Braun on the map initially. You go back 3 years ago to their feud from 2017. Yeah, Braun's actually been here for about 5 years. 5 years exactly from this week. But had it not been for that feud with Roman, who knows where Braun would have gone. I feel like he would have been another Rusev, who just got this initial big push in the Wyatt family, then floundered on and went on to do nothing. Maybe win a mid-card championship here or there, but not be the main event star that Braun has gone on to be because of Roman Reigns and beating Roman Reigns in the main events of several pay-per-views. So, anyway, they kind of backtrack with Braun, talk about how he grew up wanting to be a Hulk Hogan, but he got bullied a lot as a kid, which you would never think so just because he's a big guy. But he wasn't always that big, and he wasn't always the greatest looking kid, blah, blah, blah. He was a little overweight, didn't do him any favors, and the kids at school, they can be mean, and they bullied him. And he was so hurt to the point where he went to the gym and asked the guy who worked there, hey, I really need to get in shape. I really need to lose weight. Can you help me out? And the guy did it for free, which was really cool. Worked out, and eventually entered a strongman competition way back when in 2010, 2011, 2012. Won the strongman competition, and that was where he met Mark Henry. Mark Henry got him a tryout with WWE, and soon after, he was in WWE. Ended up getting signed by Triple H, and he makes it very clear that was one of the coolest moments and one of the best moments of his life, getting signed there. And he had debuted for WWE in 2012. We see clips of him at NXT house shows, blah, 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 working at the NXT whatever in that circuit since 2012. This guy joined the main roster in 2015. All right, before he joined the Wyatt family exactly 5 years ago this week, and he's talked about this before, he only had 8 matches to his name in those 3 years. So they barely used the guy. He was clearly a pet project of theirs, a lot like Lars Sullivan. I feel like Lars had more matches before he debuted in WWE, or rather on NXT. Braun legit did not even work NXT. Lars did. He was there for about a year or so. He was under the developmental system for a while. Braun had only been there for about 3 years, did not work any of the TVs at all, aside from serving as a rosebud for Adam Rose for a while there in 2014. But he barely had any experience. That's why he was kind of terrible from the get-go, but he ended up, learning on the fly. It was a sink or swim type situation, and he swam, and he ended up doing well, and obviously he is where he is today. And say what you will about Braun, I'm not the guy's biggest fan. I do enjoy Braun Strowman. I am a fan of his. But he's gone on to win the Money in the Bank briefcase, fake Royal Rumble match. I wouldn't call it a traditional Rumble, but it was still a Rumble, Saudi Arabia or not. It was still, a Royal Rumble match. He won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. He's the former Tag Team Champion, Intercontinental Champion, Universal Champion. The guy's done it all in a very relatively short span of time. I would consider him a success. But through his work, he wants to honor all the big men of the past, including Andre the Giant, Undertaker, Kane, Mark Henry, The Big Show, The Great Khali. All right, he didn't mention The Great Khali, but he did mention the other guys. And I thought Braun came across great here. Braun was, I think, the highlight of this documentary. Everyone they focused on was cool. Gronk, Drew, Rhea, Kevin Owens, John Cena, everyone. But Braun was the best part, just because I know how nice Braun can be. I've seen him in interviews. I've interviewed him myself. He's a very nice guy. Kind of came across in character, but whatever. I met him a couple months ago. Actually, the last autograph session that I went to, the last meet and greet that I went to, was a big event signing in New York City back in March of this year, literally days before the coronavirus hit, and everything went to shit here in the States. I got to meet Braun Strowman while he was the Intercontinental Champion. Or maybe it was right before. No, I think it was while he was the Intercontinental Champion, which was really cool. But anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, Braun Strowman. Oh, yeah, he was just a really nice guy, but I didn't know he had this extra side to him, this emotional side to him, until I saw this, which I thought was really cool. So, and he cried at least 2 or 3 times in this documentary. At least 2 or 3. So anyway, we go back to Kevin Owens. He talks about how he kind of started in the PC. His opponent, Seth Rollins of WrestleMania, did not. He won the NXT Championship. Rollins did. Ended up getting called up before the Performance Center was even started. The Performance Center came around in mid-2013. Rollins was well out of the system by that point. But Kevin Owens started in the PC. So it added an extra layer to their story going into WrestleMania, despite the unfortunate circumstances that WrestleMania is happening under. And he also never really had a chance to say goodbye to that building because of how quickly things were moving when he came to WWE. He signed in late 2014, debuted on the show in December, won the NXT Championship in February, got called up in May, still did NXT, won the Intercontinental Championship. The guy had a lot of success in a very short span of time. Very, very short. Anyway, so he went to RJ Stadium, and I say RJ because RJ Marcel, my good friend, his name is Raymond James, the same name as the stadium. So that's why I wrote RJ Stadium here in my notes. But yeah, he went to Raymond James Stadium before WrestleMania 36, not because, not just to scout out the arena, but he was there for a monster truck show with his dad, I think, and his kid. And while he was there, he saw a giant pirate ship, and he took a picture of it, and he ended up tweeting it out later on. But he said to himself when he saw that giant pirate ship, I got to jump off that thing. I got to jump off of it. And of course, when WrestleMania got canceled, that dream was crushed until he got into the PC. He saw the giant WrestleMania sign, and he literally says here, I'm going to jump off that bitch. They censor shit here, and they censor fuck in this documentary too when John Cena says it, but they don't censor bitch, which was interesting. I guess it's WWE lingo at this point, whatever. But I thought that was funny. Then he kind of goes through his WrestleMania history. They don't start from the get-go with him from like when he debuted, but they show a quick montage of that earlier when they reference his quick call-up. But he does go through his WrestleMania history. His first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 32. His first WrestleMania with the company was WrestleMania 31. But he was still in NXT at that point. His first official WrestleMania on the show is WrestleMania 32. Walked in as the Intercontinental Champion, had a great match, didn't walk out with the belt, but it was still an awesome opener for that show. WrestleMania 33, they show him beating Chris Jericho for the United States Championship. I thoroughly enjoyed the match. I was there for that match. It was cool that he won. I liked the match. This has been documented before, though, on Owens' 365. That came out, I think, late 2017. It's been a couple of years. It's been a while, but I've seen this footage before. You probably have as well. Where he went backstage, he was like, oh, yeah, WrestleMania 33 was definitely a down point for me. And I'm thinking, why? Like, when I first saw this footage, I'm like, why? Like, it was a good match. You just won the United States Championship. Why would you not like that WrestleMania? And then they show the footage. They re-showed it again here after showing it as part of that 365 a few years ago, where he goes up to Vince and Gorilla, and Vince is on the headset watching the show. Owens said, did you like that, or did I do good? And Vince literally just goes, no, I didn't like that. And then he goes back to doing what he was doing. This really awkward moment where Vince goes back to doing his job and Kevin's just standing there looking at the fucking monitor where you can just see his heart sink in that moment. I honestly hate the fact they got that on camera because it's probably even worse for Kevin Owens to relive. Because for him to go out there and have this good match that Vince, for whatever reason, did not like, and I don't know why. It wasn't this great barn burner of a match. It was still a good match, though. I didn't get that, so. Anyway, that was a down point for him. He talks about WrestleMania 34, teaming with Sami Zayn against Shane McMahon and the returning Daniel Bryan, which was a good match. And then WrestleMania 35, he wasn't even there. He literally came back after a few months off, went babyface, competed for the WWE Championship at Fastlane, and wasn't even a part of WrestleMania. Not a part of the Battle Royal. He didn't have a Kevin Owens show segment. He wasn't even on the fucking show. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. So anyway, after seeing that sign, he's like, listen, this year I'm getting my WrestleMania moment by jumping off that thing, which was great. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So they then transitioned in Rob Gronkowski, a.k.a. Gronk, who was a part of WrestleMania, if you forgot about it, because he was supposed to be the host. And they actually announced that before the whole pandemic happened. And they announced that he'd be the host, I think, after the pandemic happened, but he was a part of WWE before everything went to shit. They were announced that he had signed, that he'd be on SmackDown, all this other shit. He was actually on that first SmackDown during the pandemic. That first pandemic SmackDown of the PC, he was there. He was on that show. So anyway, he said that despite the fact that there's no fans, I'm still going to bring the energy just because I got Mojo with me, and obviously him and Mojo are very close. He helped Mojo win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal 3 years ago, WrestleMania 33. Great moment. I was there for it. He's been at various NXT house shows where Mojo was there. I was at an NXT house show about 4.5 years ago in Lowell, Massachusetts, and fucking Rob Gronkowski was there. I had honestly no idea who that guy was. I'm not going to lie. In 2016, I had no idea who Gronk was. And I heard he was there, and people were freaking out. I'm like, who the hell is Rob Gronkowski, you know? But it was funny. It was a house show. It wasn't even a TV taping or a takeover. It was a friggin' house show in Mass, which I'm sure is where he lived or was stationed out of at the time, but I thought that was funny. But he admits he grew up watching people like Stone Cold Steve Austin. He mentions Val Venus. So he was obviously a big Attitude Era fan. That much is obvious. That much is apparent. And he talked about how WWE allowed him to work with Mojo. And that was part of the reason why he came to WWE, was so he could work with his very good friend Mojo Rawley. I'm sure Mojo had been pushing that for a long time. So for that to finally come to fruition, I'm sure he really, really enjoyed. So this is when they show the clip that went up on, I want to say Saturday, as a preview for this 24. Okay, so they show Vince jumping off the fucking balcony. Remember at WrestleMania, and this was a whole big report, by the way. Remember WrestleMania, Gronk jumped off the balcony on top of all the goofs, and that's how we won the 24/7 championship? He was scared to do it, and props to Fightful. Sean Ross Sapp actually reported this before anyone else after the fact, like in May or June, I think. I forgot when it was, but he reported it a while after WrestleMania happened, and he was like, well, this is a crazy story about how Gronk was scared to jump backward. It was like basically falling backward on top of a bunch of guys. Gronk was scared to do it. He was scared to practice it. So Vince was like, oh, what are you so scared about? So Vince did it himself. He didn't fall on top of the group of guys, but he fell on top of a mattress or this giant blow-up, pad that he could fall on top of. Now 75-year-old Vince McMahon, then 74, jumping on a giant pad. Something I never thought I would see until I watched this documentary. I heard that story from Fightful. I believed it. I never thought we would actually see the footage. We fucking got it, and that's amazing. I thought this was just amazing. This was definitely the best part of the entire thing. Braun was great, but this whole clip, it's a minute and a half long. It's on the YouTube channel, the WWE YouTube channel, if you want to check it out. I thought that was just great. And Rhea Ripley, surely hoping for a call-up, calls Vince a badass. She's probably thinking to herself, oh, is that enough to get myself a main roster call-up? I kid. They recapped Night 1 of WrestleMania, which I thought might have been better than Night 2. Night 1 was really good. Night 1 had, I think, the ladder match? I don't remember. I know it had Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross winning the women's tag team titles from the Kabuki Warriors. I know it had the Boneyard match, obviously. Braun beating Goldberg for the Universal Championship. Kevin Owens and Seth. Charlotte and Rhea was on Night 2. I think Becky and Sheena was on Night 1. Pretty sure. So it had a lot of those matches. And then they show Kevin Owens jumping off the WrestleMania sign, which was a great moment. He said he was very proud of the match, as probably Rollins was as well, and he's very happy that he got his WrestleMania moment. They then fast forward to Strowman for his big moment, where he became Universal Champion on a whim, literally on a whim. We did not know he was going for that championship until like 2 days before, okay? Strowman said he was nervous going in, and he got really emotional talking about the match and the fact that he got to beat Goldberg of all people, not just wrestle Goldberg at WrestleMania, but beat Goldberg at WrestleMania, to not only just beat him, but win the Universal Championship. We got to see Goldberg congratulate Braun, too. He was like, oh, yeah, long time coming, man. You deserve it, or something like that. That was really fucking cool. Again, say what you will about Bill Goldberg. I thought that was awesome. And he said he got really emotional again, talking about how he can't wait to tell his parents and how, I would tell the former 10-year-old version of myself, just keep going and shut those bullies up by winning by winning the title, blah, blah, blah. I actually feel bad now that his reign was as uneventful as it was. I mean, it's not his fault, but the Brave feud dominated his entire reign. He had that handicap match with Miz and Morrison, which sucked. His reign really wasn't that good at all, but it was cool that he got that moment, at least for himself. And I wasn't a real big fan of the fact that Strowman won, just because the guy was made to look like a loser going into that show. But for his sake, it was a really cool moment. We then get into the Firefly Funhouse stuff, which was on Night 2. And Cena was like, oh, anything after my entrance is going to be fucking weird, so just enjoy it. And obviously they bleep out fucking, but I thought it was funny they got that on camera. He loved the Firefly Funhouse match, and they show them putting it together. They show fan reactions and shit. I thought the Firefly Funhouse match was great. If I had to pick between the two, I would pick the... what's it called? God, the Boneyard match. How did I forget about that? I would pick the Boneyard match over the Firefly Funhouse match. But both matches were great. And the cinematic matches kind of got out of hand after a while in all the companies. They haven't done one in a while because they don't really have to now, WWE with the Thunderdome. But those two first matches of the cinematic era were really, really good. We also got Rhea Ripley and Charlotte in the opening of WrestleMania Night 2 for WrestleMania 36. Rhea says this was a match that she always wanted, to be here in WWE, to be at WrestleMania, something she had always wanted. That match meant a lot to her. And even in defeat, it was a great match. And I still say to myself all these months later, why the fuck did they have Charlotte win that match? It literally served no purpose. They had nothing for Charlotte to do, so they put the belt on her and put her in NXT for a couple of months. The matches with Mia Yim it was a good match. The Io Shirai match was kind of underwhelming. It was on the show itself. The Rhea match was great at WrestleMania. I don't know. It just was a complete waste. They totally sacrificed Rhea's momentum. For what? For fucking what? She did nothing after that. And Rhea's only now starting to regain that momentum. Now that she's feuding with Mercedes Martinez and apparently Raquel Gonzalez, there was no reason to take the belt off of her. Io Shirai should have beaten Rhea Ripley for that title, period. No argument, end of story. Charlotte served zero purpose in NXT. That being said, they had a great match. And I thought it was cool of Charlotte to hug Rhea afterward, and Rhea started crying. And she even said, people who know me well enough know that I don't cry. But that moment, that match was important enough to her to make her cry, which I thought was really cool. They showed Drew beating Brock Lesnar, slaying the Beast to become the new WWE champion. He looked right in the camera and thanked the fans watching around the world, which was cool. They show him getting congratulated backstage by Michael P.S. Hayes, which was random as hell. And even said the crowd got to see him in a special private moment that doesn't really usually sink in until you're back at the hotel, you're looking at the championship, and you're thinking to yourself, holy shit, I just won the championship in the main event of WrestleMania. That moment for him happened right then and there in the friggin' building because there were no fans. You're not feeding off the adrenaline. You're just, you're already kind of thinking about it. It's already sinking in. And he was really thankful that he got to, share that special moment with the audience watching worldwide. We see this really funny clip of Gronk on the phone backstage. He's like out, with friggin' Kofi's there, Mojo, obviously. There was a female, though, there, too. I don't remember who it was. Maybe someone from SmackDown? It wasn't like Carmella. I don't remember who it was. But anyway, Gronk was on the phone. And he was like pretending to be on the phone. He's like, I better call Tampa Bay. Got to make up for the fact that it couldn't be a WrestleMania. Let's join the Buccaneers. Ha ha ha. And I see that clip and I'm like, that's funny because he is part of the Buccaneers. What I forgot about, though, was the timeline. Gronk actually joined Tampa Bay after WrestleMania. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure it happened after WrestleMania, not before. He was a part of the Patriots. Technically he was retired going into WrestleMania until the whole Buccaneers thing happened in late April. So maybe I'm sure he already had an idea by that point that he might join the Buccaneers unless the deal came together at the last minute, which I don't think it did. Usually a lot of thought goes into those type of things. I'm not a big football guy, so I don't know. But I thought that was funny. So they show fan reactions to the show, watching at home, enjoying the entire event. Drew McIntyre says, and as does Seth Rollins, he echoes these thoughts, saying this is the WrestleMania that will never be forgotten. And to close this thing out, we see Edge, the Rated R Superstar, standing on top of a ladder, talking to the crew down below, saying, thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to film this stuff. We appreciate your work. We appreciate your dedication. Thank you for all that you do. And I thought that was a great note to end on. I really do. The crew does not get enough credit. The superstars are amazing enough, but the people that make it happen, behind the camera, the audio, the social media guys, all those people, they don't often get shown enough love. So I thought that was cool. A really, really nice gesture there from Edge to close this thing out. But yeah, really, really good 24. I thoroughly enjoyed this. The hour flew by, and I was really, we all joked months ago that that WWE 24 on WrestleMania 36, we knew it was going to be great. We knew it was, we all couldn't wait for that 24, for them talking about how the fuck they were going to make this shit happen. And they just put it out months early. We usually don't get these 24s on WrestleMania, like I said earlier, until Royal Rumble time. So the fact that they, aired it 5 months early, right after SummerSlam and not WrestleMania, is pretty cool. And again, I feel like they were just waiting on putting this out. I felt like they were going to put it out a while later, but just because they're out of the Thunderdome now, they're like, haha, we're past the Performance Center, so we can kind of put it out now. But either way, I thought this was really, really good. So check it out right now on the WWE Network. WrestleMania, the show must go on. Thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Hit that little bell button as well to be notified every time a new video is uploaded here to the channel. This should be going up on Saturday or Sunday. There's a ton of new content to come on the network, including an R-Truth game show review, I assume, a new Chronicle, I believe, on Braun Strowman. So there's a lot of stuff to get to, a lot of stuff to review. All should be up in due time, which is why you should subscribe. Subscribe for more Raw Talk reviews, Talking Smack, WrestleRant radio excerpts, #AskGSM, SmackDown reviews, and so much more. Have a great rest of your weekend, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.